Alright ladies, this screencast is going to start with the idea of the melting pot. With all of the different immigrants coming from various aspects of the world, America was becoming more and more like a melting pot, a mixture of people from different cultures and races who blend together into this kind of American mixture, I guess. Now, the thing that's kind of a bit controversial with this definition is while all the various cultures and identities go into the pot for the the melting pot theory, they start kind of blending together and they don't really stand out as much anymore. And so I know Mr. O'Hara does a really great job freshman year of explaining to his students that maybe a more optimistic approach to the theory would be that we were more of a gumbo, because with a gumbo, you can actually still pick out the various parts, the roux, the rice, the tomatoes, the sausage, the chicken, the onion, rather than if everything's all melted together, yeah, there's various flavors involved, but you can't identify them individually. And we like to appreciate our individual backgrounds. But the truth is that at the turn of the century, they are kind of expecting the immigrants to really abandon their cultures and embrace the native American customs. And there are several immigrants who don't want to follow that route, but they're going to be even shown more stronger opposition. So we're going to identify this term that is nativism. Nativism is defined as overt favoritism towards native-born Americans. Basically, some Americans are opposing the different cultures and values that immigrants are bringing into our country at the time, and they want them to embrace the American way of life, and if they refuse, then they don't want them to come at all. So you really see people feeling that the American way, the English language, the Western European customs and ideals were the superior customs and ideals. There is definitely some racism that is stemming from this idea of nativism. We also see anti-Asian settlement. This always sticks out in my mind because Asians are really persecuted in the West Coast because of the large numbers of them coming into the West Coast at this point in history, and really it's people who fear the Asian immigrants taking American jobs away. Asian laborers were willing to work for less money than American laborers, and so many companies, for example, like the railroad lines, would pay Asian laborers over American laborers would choose to pay them because they could pay them less, and that makes more money for them. So the American laborers oppose Asian immigration because of this, and they will lobby and fight enough that in the 1880s, Congress will pass what is called the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese Exclusion Act bans entry to for all Chinese immigrants. So no Chinese immigrants would be allowed to enter America unless they were students, teachers, or government officials, or merchants. All of those with the mindset that they would eventually go back. So you weren't just allowed to move to the U.S. and migrate legally if you were from China. This law actually exists until the 1940s, which is just an embarrassment that it went on that long. But yes, it's actually the Chinese that Americans first completely ban from immigration. We're going to now quickly go over the challenges of urbanization. Urbanization is defined as the growth of cities as a result of immigration and industrialization. So urbanization, think like urban, like the urban scene is like the city scene. Urbanization is the growth in cities as a result of immigration and industrialization, because of the number of immigrants coming into the cities, also because of the industrialized jobs that are coming to the scene. the cities are growing, okay, in population, and there's many problems with this because there's just in general a shortage of places to live, and we'll talk about the other problems that arise from there. But yeah, immigrants would choose to settle in the cities because that's where the most convenient places to live were and where most of the jobs were. And then we do start seeing some Americans move like from the country to the city. The South really wasn't industrializing at all at this point, and so they're kind of behind on the economic curve, and their economy is still doing kind of bad after the Civil War. So many Americans are looking for job opportunities. They will also move from the South, like from the country life to the city life. So you see that happening as well. Now, several problems, like I said, happening because of this rapid growth of cities. We'll start with urbanization. It's just too darn crowded. Like, there's not enough housing available to house all of the people who are moving into the cities. The cities can't keep up with the growing population. You start seeing multiple families sharing one apartment, which is just really unfortunate, and kind of people are tight and compact and not comfortable, and that's just really upsetting. That was a big problem. But this is what's happening for most immigrants. Most immigrants are having multiple families in one like little 2-bedroom apartment, kind of really compact. You also have a problem with transportation because we're just getting to the point where public transportation's kind of becoming invented with like the electric transit you see on the screen. But you couldn't really choose to live like in a suburb. First of all, there's no such thing as suburbs yet. Suburbs don't exist until there's a car, because how are you going to get from the suburb to the city without a car? Okay, so that's the problem, is people really can't live that far outside of the city if they can't make it to the city for their job, and that's where their jobs are located. The water is just not very safe in terms of like drinking it, cooking with it, bathing with it. It's not a clean water that we like have in Baton Rouge today. Sanitation is poor, with trash often being just like thrown in the streets because there's no modern trash pickup. And just, more people in cities, more crime in cities. That's a natural occurrence. And then the last problem we'll talk about is fire. Now, fire is kind of a danger that stems from the overcrowding within the cities, because if the housing and all the people are all close together and on top of each other, then that means if a fire was to break out, it could really spread very quickly and very easily. And that is going to happen in the city of Chicago, which is the Great Chicago Fire. Happens around this point in history, late 1800s. I don't need you to know these statistics, but just to give you an idea of how bad it was, again, not going to be tested on these numbers, over 300 people were killed in this fire, and 3 square miles of the entire city of Chicago were destroyed, which is going to lead us to about $200 million worth of damage. That just shows you how fire could easily escalate and get out of hand. So all of these problems combined are kind of issues that are reflective of urbanization. And we will talk about how Americans demand and eventually the government intervenes and try to aid and fix some of these problems experienced both in the cities and also just by immigrants as a whole. So please write down any questions you have, and I will see y'all to answer them in class tomorrow. Y'all have a good night.